To this edition of the Rough 'em Up podcast. I am the A-Train Arlington Lane, and joining me as always for this program is Mr. Roughneck himself, Cullen Watkins. How you doing today, sir?
I am doing pretty good. Before the show, Arlington, we were talking heartbreaking loss this week. Heartbreaking loss. Oh,
Aren't you tired of hearing those words? Heartbreaking loss
I
each
am
week.
very tired. As a Houston sports fan, I am tired of hearing those two words.
Yeah, and it happened again this week, folks. Michigan came in with a second half spurt, and they beat our Houston Roughnecks 26-22. Had a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter, and two scores by Michigan sealed the deal. Bryce Perkins coming in a relief for Danny Etling in the second half, and he came in and he did an amazing job. He had a total of 197 yards of total offense. 76 of them were on the ground and 121 in the air.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts of Bryce Perkins you saw on this past week?
Whew. Game changer. If Michigan does not put in Bryce Perkins for majority of this game, Houston Roughnecks are leaving with the win. The Panthers won because of Bryce Perkins. And it's funny, you look at Bryce Perkins and you look at Nolan Henderson, they're very similar to each other. They're both on the smaller side, and they can pass the ball, but oh boy, can they run. I mean, Bryce Perkins filled in. You didn't need Wes Hills. I know Wes Hills is injured, but with Bryce Perkins in, that is your running game. That is your running game with him in. I was just blown away by Bryce Perkins. And Arlington, we were also talking with the Panthers going and playing the Stallions this week and the week after for the conference championship, who's Michigan going to play? And now, luckily for us, we're not a Michigan podcast, so we don't need to try and decipher that because I don't know what Mike Nolan is going to do. I do not know. But Bryce Perkins this game, amazing. I'm sure you can agree with me. He looked great out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody look at the passer rating. I mean, the passer rating was actually pretty good. You look at the stat itself, 7 for 18. Okay, cool. But the fact that he's able to get 2 touchdowns and 150 yards plus get 66 yards on the ground himself, not a bad day for Nolan Henderson at 216. But for the Roughnecks case, is finding who's going to be the glue, to this offense. And going into the future, even hearing some rumblings that TDECU is back in play for next season for the Roughnecks. So we'll see if that is a major play as the UFL's offseason when that progresses. But that would be a good place for them to enjoy, because Rice Stadium is fine. It's a fine venue, but it wasn't TDECU. And so the change in that, a lot of people think of home field advantage, and I think they had a better home field advantage there than they did because they could have had a much better record than where they at right now. They're sitting at 1-8, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's something about that home field to me that, and them in the game that they had. There have been numerous games this season where they had a lead and just couldn't hold on and finish it. So here we are.
It's just this team has not been able to play when the game matters. Under pressure, they haven't been able to execute. And Arlington, going back to your point about TDECU, call me biased all you want. I am very biased. Go Cougs. Of course, I want my favorite football team to play on my college campus's football stadium. But TDECU is just, that's where the Roughnecks play. And when we're talking about going into next year, which, folks, FYI, for this podcast and definitely the next podcast, That's probably what we're going to be talking about a lot, because that's really the only positive thing we can take away. We can look at the positives and see what we're going to be taking into next year. But Arlington, I see in the future Nolan Henderson, Justin Hall playing in TDECU Stadium next year with a good record, because you talk about the glue. I think we're getting some sneak peeks. Justin Hall has been the guy on this
Hmm.
offense
Hmm.
that he hasn't been given the opportunities. He put up 6 receptions, 109 yards, and 2 touchdowns this game. He broke away for the longest touchdown of the season for Houston. Bring him back. He is legit. Justin Hall is legit. We got to bring him back next year.
You definitely have some pieces that you want to bring into the mix coming next season, and hopefully that they they didn't finish. I think they finished 1-4 at home. Um,
Yep.
Final record for the
Yep.
season for that, because their last game is featured in Memphis,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a very interesting way to close out the year. the two
Toilet
teams,
bowl.
the two teams with the worst records are closing out the year, and then a rematch of the XF. Well, we'll get into that when we get to the picks, but for the Roughnecks' sake, um, yeah, they do have pieces, man. It's just that it's about finishing off the games, and they have a huge problem with that. And it's like when they get into the fourth quarter, they don't know how to stop anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big issue when especially you are playing with the lead and you're always playing on your heels. You have to continue to be aggressive when you're out there. And so they may have done so, but there were some mistakes that were made to the point where, they wind up losing the game.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that when you're trying to get wins.
Mm-hmm. And Reuben Foster was out, so that really sucks. Having our best guy on defense arguably out. But yeah, you're correct about our defense just giving up way too much when it matters. For the game, Michigan Panthers are averaging 6.6 yards per play. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's tough to win football games when your defense is giving up that much. It doesn't matter how good Nolan Henderson plays, how good our offense is. It's like you said, Arlington, when you're playing on your heels, no matter what sport you're playing, it's tough to win football games. Now, Arlington, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Talking about just giving up way too much in the fourth, not being able to perform when it matters. Is that a coaching issue or a player issue?
It's got to be a little bit of both. I know we've been sitting here on this show. We have criticized Price, the offensive coordinator. And we also have criticized C.J. Johnson. But among those other players, it goes to when you have a offensive line that allows 4 sacks, 3 of them by Braylon Speaks. That's not a coaching problem. That's a player problem. That's you're not doing your job when you're supposed to be protecting the quarterback. And um or you something you're not listening to a play or something like that.
Mhm.
Like something has to give. Like you have to, if you just sitting there and you're like, I care less what coach says. I'm not saying that that's sometimes players are like that. I don't care what coach is saying, so I'm just gonna do my own thing. And what happens, it leads to breakdowns. And then because don't be getting wrong, on the defensive side, they were able to do their job. But hey, the defense can only do so much.
Mhm.
They can only do so much if they are constantly on the field. Because from what I saw, ball control, they had the ball for over 30 minutes
Mhm.
and you still lost.
Mhm.
So something's wrong with that offensively. And you got the 2 touchdowns. So you're thinking, hey, we're on we're on one accord, but there were some other miscues that, you know, didn't, get us the dub. So
Mhm.
it's a mixture of both players and coaches.
And that's really been. I feel we're talking about the defense being on the field. It was 100. It felt like 107 in Houston during game time. You gotta, come on. You gotta give your defense more more breathing time, and that's been the issue for this Roughnecks offense the entire year. It's quick drives, and talking about the sacks. man, it's the final drive. You have a chance to win the game. And Nolan Henderson's rolling out with a ton of pressure. Breland Speaks. He slips for a big sack. You can't have that when the game is on the line. But
Right.
this upcoming game against Memphis, I've heard some rumblings. Maybe the UFL decides what they did in the USFL in 2022, where it's like whoever wins this game gets the number one overall pick in the collegiate draft this upcoming off season. We don't know for sure. I'd love to see it. How do you think this game is going to go? I think you start Henderson. You do exactly what you did against Michigan. Do you agree?
I would say you would start Nolan Henderson again this week. He has been a bright spot in the offense despite the accuracy numbers not being the best, but he's been a playmaker. So you want a playmaker out there. And you said, Reuben Foster will don't know if he'll actually make his return this season or not. But even with you had a guy like a Markel Roby who had an interception in the game. You need those types of guys to make plays on the ball, and so um, finding ways to 33 minutes with the ball is crazy, and you still lose. So you still maintain that, but also find ways to make sure that the defense 3 and outs, you're gonna have to cease those. Those hurt defenses because
Mm-hmm.
that means they have to do more work to try and get the ball back. So at this rate now, going into this final game, if you're going to win, you're going to have to make sure you're making plays and you're limiting the mistakes. That
Mm-hmm.
has been the key for every single team, including this Roughnecks team,
Mm-hmm.
is limiting the mistakes. And then, even though there weren't many, still passes not being caught.
Yep.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, Nolan Henderson fumbled in the first series, and
Mm-hmm.
so those are the types of things you got to do if you want to get this dub and you want to finish the season on a bright note. If not, it's just going to be a ridiculous, crazy off season for that Roughnecks team.
Mm-hmm. And if there's a team to clean up the mistakes and end on a bright spot, luckily we're playing the Memphis Showboats, who in their own right, man, what? Correct me if I'm wrong. They have an 8-game losing streak. The last time they won a game was week 1 against the Houston Roughnecks. So if there's a game to come back and have a better view going into the offseason, it will be against the Memphis Showboats. Of course, we're playing in Memphis. And Memphis is a team that they've had sort of the same issues as the Houston Roughnecks. Who started this past week? It was not in. I wasn't able to get the game in my area. I got the Roughnecks
That's
game.
right. It was the double. They did
Yes.
the regional games this
Yes.
past week. So you asking who was the starter
Was it
for?
Love? Was it Love for Memphis? May
I
have
I
been a
gotta
few
go check.
guys
Yeah, I gotta check real quick. Because they had a rough time against the DC Defenders themselves.
for
So
a blowout.
so yeah, this Showboats team, they had high expectations going in, especially with Case Cookis. Um, yeah, Josh Love was the starter for
Yeah.
um the Showboats, and even that, Darius Victor almost had 100 yards in the game. So that's something you got to look forward to when you plan this squad. Had a he's had an up and down year, mostly down, but I'm saying and you have a bright spot with that. That's something to roll into in the next game, despite the big loss. One final home game for them, so they're going to try and do that and show out. And you got to get to Josh Love. Got to get to Josh Love and rattle him. Got to rattle those quarterbacks um, next week. This is it. So you may not have a lot to look forward to, but if you want that number one pick and get a dub, so
Yep.
go ahead and finish out the season on a bright note, and then they can always discuss what they want to do with coaches and whatnot in the off season. But you want to end the season on a bright note. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I'm looking at things right now.
And these players are still playing for potential spots, whether it's the teams they're on now or teams for next season. So that's why, folks, it's still worth watching all of these games. These games still matter for all those players touching the ball out there. Um, And Arlington, think about this, and I'm having to remind myself this. Whoever loses this game will finish 1-9. One of the worst seasons we've seen in spring football history. So, I mean, 1-9, that is bad. That is bad. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll go into predictions eventually if you want to do it now, whatever. But I think Roughnecks are going to pick up the win. I think they are. I really liked how they played against Michigan. I was almost right on my prediction. Arlington, you had a great week when it came to predictions. We are actually all tied
Thank you,
up 21 to
Renegades, though.
15.
Thank you, Renegades, for
Yeah.
messing up that whole thing.
Whew. Whew. I was at that Renegades game. Got really sunburnt, but man, well, come on. It sucks to see the Renegades as bad as they are record wise, because when they're on, they're on. I love Luis Perez and whatnot, but if you want to go into predictions, we can. I'll start it
Oh,
off. Roughnecks
go
versus
ahead.
Showboats. Houston Roughnecks get the win.
No, I'll have to agree with that. I don't see a lot of promise coming out of Memphis. There's been a tailspin going downwards. Um, After that first game, it just seemed like that the the, the unit that they have just couldn't be cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, injuries have played a big part of it. Losing Case Cookers for a little bit. Then when he did return, just seemed like that flow of their offense just went south, completely south, and it had not changed over the course of the season. And so I think it's going to remain. And then Memphis is going to have a nine game losing streak to close out the year, which would be profound. Um, I just need that CJ Johnson and Price to have a great game offensively.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of did this past week. They just couldn't get the dub. It was like, what do we do now? But um, and that's tough. That's tough for those types of coaches, mostly the two teams with the worst records right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you gotta make it happen here, and I gotta go for Houston here. I think
Yep.
CJ Johnson is gonna get the last win before the year is out.
I agree. I agree. It's just Memphis is such a shame going into the season. Never would have thought.
High expectations, yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of high expectations for them.
yeah. That team's way too talented to have the record that they do. So, but luckily that means hopefully just a few small fixes for them over the off season. They can get back on track. But I don't know as Roughnecks fans if we want that. But uh, I agree.
Definitely,
Roughnecks
there's
over
definitely going to need to be
Showboat.
some upgrades in the off season. So,
Definitely.
um, yeah, we'll see what occurs when we get to that point. But in this case, Roughnecks over Showboats in the finale.
Renegades versus Defenders in DC. This should be a really interesting game. What are your thoughts before I say mine?
Um, Great job by both teams getting wins this past week. Uh, I'm gonna get into that when we get to the next couple of teams of the other team for the Renegades that they played, but they did what they were supposed to do on offense. They were pinpointed, and somebody on the telecast said that this was the best 1-7 team they had ever seen. So that lets you know that this team was never looked at to be 1-7. They just had a lot of bad breaks, and they stuck with their quarterback despite many people, even the fans in the community, really believe that Lindsey Scott should have been the guy to get some starts in for this team. But Bob Stoops believed in Luis Perez, and it showed. They got the 14-point win against St. Louis. But DC, they got back on track. Even though they got the better record going into this game, um, it's going to be interesting to see how well these two teams can play. I'm going to choose the Renegades over the DC Defenders in this game. I was going to choose DC because of the great game that they had, but I like the Renegades in this exit 2023 XFL Championship rematch again.
I'd have to agree with you on that. I wanted to go DC because they're in DC, and again, they had a great game against the Memphis Showboats. But there's the one defining factor that made me pick the Arlington Renegades, and that's Teamu's turnovers. He did give up the ball a lot against Memphis, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just they're lucky that Memphis offense can't get down the field for their life. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you you won't be able to get away with that necessarily against Arlington. And Perez, I know everyone's saying Lindsey Scott. I love Lindsey Scott Jr. He was supposed to be a roughneck this year. But Luis Perez, he's a league leading quarterback in passing yards, and he will move the ball. You know what you're getting from him. Teamu, I feel really bad for him. I almost want to make an off-season video highlighting him because he's been such a unique case in this league so far, coming off an Offensive Player of the Year award to now I struggling, but it's so similar to what we saw when he was with the Tampa Bay Bandits. He just can't get any protection or help from his teammates. So DC, I'd hate to be a DC Defenders fan, especially coming off of the year that they had last season. They'll get back next season though, especially if they get Abram Smith back. But Arlington has to get the win here. I think they played way too well last game. And also, did you see their championship rings? Their championship rings looked very, very nice.
Fantastic. Yes, they did.
I actually went to. I thought it was an open event, so I went to Texas Live to see if I could go. And nope, they didn't allow any. No public in, no fans in. Arlington, I could go on a huge rant about just all of that, but that's not what this podcast is about. I find it crazy that you don't allow fans into your team's championship ring thing, but whatever. Next game, Brahmas at Battlehawks.
Interesting game here because the winner's going to get the home game. It doesn't matter at this point. Uh, if Battlehawks win, they will have a better conference record, and then they will, of course, hold the. Um, even though they'll be tied for records, they'll have 2 wins against San Antonio, and they'll have a better conference record, which would allow them to have the home game in the XFL championship, conference championship game. For the Brahmas' sake, all they have to do is win. They win, they get the game in San Antonio. That's simple. They'll finish at 8-2. So let's see the Battlehawks try to pull it off because everything still is in their hands. They still have an opportunity to make this work where they can get a home game. And it would be good for the city of St. Louis if they were able to get it. If not, like I said, San Antonio is going to win this outright if they win. So a lot is on this at stake for them too. If they want the home game, they got to win. If not, St. Louis will get the home game, and even though they're tied at 7-3, they'll have a better conference record and a better record against San Antonio. But it's difficult to get 2 wins. So what is the play here for this game, and of course the next game we're going to do after?
I
So I
agree.
got the Battlehawks.
So you have the Battlehawks. For me, this pick depends on if AJ McCarron is playing. If AJ McCarron is playing, Battlehawks, I think, take it. But if Manny Wilkins is playing, or I hate to say even Brandon Silvers, I think the Brahmas take it. And I, is St. Louis really going to play AJ McCarron this week? I don't know. We don't know how his ankle is doing. Uh, so I'm going to take the Brahmas this week. But as soon as I get the news that AJ McCarron is playing, I'm going to be panicking. But I can't go back on my picks. Uh, I have the Brahmas. I really like Chase
You know what?
Garbers.
You know
So
what? This is what I say to that. You know what? I should change my pick. The only reason why I said it because you're right. AJ McCarron is the key factor here, no matter what. And he has a knack for playing in San Antonio. Like he would rather play there than he would love to play in St. Louis. Don't get me wrong, but there's something about a road team going in and causing chaos.
mhm.
So I think let me step back a little bit. I'm gonna go with the Brahmas this week
Okay.
because I look at it as this. I see a trap coming in the conference championship. I see a trap game. I really see it. And the it's going to lead to the Battlehawks at 6-4, seeing themselves as the underdog, and they're going to play into their mind, hey, we can outdo them in their house. We'll know their game plan and we can switch it up. And the only thing, AJ McCarron's gonna be playing in that game no matter what,
Mm-hmm.
whether hurt or not. He's playing in that game. So that's gonna be the key thing. So yeah, I'm gonna pick the Brahmas here in
Okay.
this game. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I like it. And too, the Battlehawks, doesn't matter where they play in the conference championship because they know if they win, they're playing the whole freaking championship in St. Louis regardless. So I like that pick, Arlington. I like that pick.
Yeah,
And
I
then
think about that.
finally, another great conversation right here. Panthers at Stallions.
This is a difficult one. This really is a difficult pick. I know people don't really look at it that way, but it is. The reason why I say that is because one, Birmingham is 8-1, Michigan is 7-2. Birmingham loses to Michigan. It's going to lead a little bit of chaos that's going to tiebreakers to who's going to get the home game. And if Michigan messes around and get the home game, that's a whole nother totally different ball game here. Me personally, I like chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I like chaos. Granted, there's no chaos in Brahmas and Battlehawks. There's really no chaos there, but there's chaos in Stallions Panthers. And so I'm going to choose the Michigan Panthers for the simple fact I
Oh,
want to see some chaos. I
oh,
want to see some straight chaos going into this fight because Birmingham dropping those last two games. Ooh, they're gonna if the game is in Michigan, happens to get to Michigan, it's gonna be a lot of chaos in that game. Guarantee you. I want to see them beat Birmingham. So it's gonna be interesting to see what Birmingham does to if they start Martinez or they start Matt
mhm.
Corral, starting him because they still have him out there, and you don't want to play Adrian Martinez too much because he's the right now he is the leading candidate in my opinion for UFL.
Y'all, it's Cullen here. I'm interrupting this final portion of the Rough 'em Up podcast to tell y'all some sad news. Well, the sad news is that the last few minutes of this episode sadly did not save because during the time of the recording, both me and Arlington actually, our areas got hit by some bad, severe weather, some severe thunderstorms. So we are both fine, but that meant the connection was awful on the day of this recording. So, for some reason, the final few minutes did not save, but that's okay. Y'all didn't really miss much. It was just me going over my picks. Yeah, it was just me going over my picks. So, if you are interested yet, if you want to see my picks, I have it up in the graphics during the episode, and I also have Arlington's up as well. Like I always do, I always have the both of our prediction graphics up. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.